What's poppin', people? It's Dante, getting my morning started here in Fairmount Park, Philadelphia. The more you love life, the more you photograph life. So today I'm thinking about why this matters and how we can apply this to our everyday lives as photographers. So I believe that ultimately motivation derives from your legs, from the physical movement of your body. You know, I like to think that I'm driven by courage. You know, my body is the vehicle. And essentially, when I make a photograph and I look back at the photograph, it's a reflection of my heart. Core meaning heart. It's a reflection of my courage, right? I think ultimately it requires courage for you to be out here in the world exploring endlessly. You know, the world is the ultimate arena, and that was a good kick. There's just so much out here. You know, there's so much to do, to see, to explore, to experience, and to photograph, right? And so ultimately at the forefront of our practice, courage is required. You know, the courage to wake up in the morning, to get out of your bed, to move your body, to go out there and to experience life on the front lines of life. You know, this to me is the ultimate joy of photography. And so I'm thinking today about how to get this across, right? This very simple notion of falling in love with life in the context of photography, and how this inspires me to continuously make photographs each and every day, no matter how mundane things may seem. You know, the question that I like to ask myself is very simple. What will reality manifest to be in a photograph? And what this means is I'm simply curious about what the result in the photograph will be. What will the camera see? You know, I'm not necessarily looking at life for what it is, but what it could be. And so when I make a photograph of something, I'm simply asking why. I'm simply putting a question mark on life itself. And through this act of photographing and going out there each and every day and looking at life intensely and all of the details and complexities, I can then become much more in tune with my perception of reality, which is ultimately what determines my everyday life and thoughts and feelings. And so photography is a way for you to cultivate your own sense of curiosity. It's a way for you to wake up each day with openness and eagerness for the day. For me, ultimately, what this all comes down to, you know, photographing, making pictures, is curiosity. You know, how curious can you be each and every day? How curious are you to go out there and make photographs and make sense of things, where these very beautiful little moments of trash discarded on the ground become my canvas to draw upon? You know, there's an infinite way to photograph. And so ultimately, one of the creative things that I've unlocked to flourish as a photographer recently has been to essentially treat light as my medium. And so by treating light as my medium, or not necessarily, like, light is the medium, right? Phos meaning light, graphia meaning writing or drawing, right? Photography is drawing with light. Essentially, I treat light as my subject. And so the way the light changes throughout the day, throughout the seasons, you know, if it's a cloudy day, a rainy day like today, you know, maybe it's a sunny day, the golden hour, the blue hour, you know, sunrise, sunset, you know, the differences in the lighting conditions, whether it's harsh or soft. You know, this to me is my subject, is following the light and using light and the way that I can draw with light to create something from nothing. And this is a very, like, this to me is the powerful mindset philosophy shift, is using light as the subject. Because when you use light as the subject, you're no longer dependent on a theme, a project, or something to photograph, but using light itself as the subject, and the way that it carves into surfaces, textures, people, places, and things ultimately give me this ability to articulate the world, putting order to the chaos. And this for me is the most empowering mindset shift that I've adopted as a photographer, is simply treating light as my subject. You know, I'm curious about light on surface and how to manipulate it, or articulate it rather, and I find this to be infinitely novel. You know, where everywhere I am and anything in front of me becomes photographable because of this notion of light being my subject. And so in order to go out there and to photograph on the days where you don't feel like photographing, I think it's very simple, actually. You know, for me, I find that And you know, this is going to be very besides the point of photography. The only life worth living is a life full of vitality. And the more photographs I make is a reflection of my vitality, my vigor, my passion, my drive to go out there each day, right? If that makes sense. Where, you know, the more sleep I get, you know, the more power I have, the more sunlight I absorb on my skin, you know, the more energy I have in my body, in my bones, in my muscles, the more I go out there and photograph. And so to stay inspired to continuously shoot, I get to bed early, I get, you know, 8 to 10 hours of sleep, I eat the right foods, I go into the day stretching, doing yoga, drinking water, I'll drink some coffee. And this is very much correlated to my photography, because the more vitality in my body and my muscles and my mind, you know, the more I go out there and I find myself photographing. And so, yeah, I think at the end of the day, to improve as a photographer, one must fall in love with life itself. And in order to fall in love with life itself, one must feel good, one must feel powerful, one must feel physically capable of moving your body out there into the world. And so it's very much a physical pleasure, the act of making a photograph, of simply walking, exploring, observing. And this is very much rooted in my philosophy of photography, is the physical nature of it all, where I find the physicality of walking and listening and smelling and touching and thinking and watching and, you know, having the everyday experience of just being out in the world is, for me, what brings life meaning is through that act of making the photographs and walking and exploring and having experiences. And so if you're looking to stay inspired to shoot, think about more ways in which you can actually cultivate curiosity, or like look at the dewdrops. You know, like when you start to when you slow down and you look at everything around you as a potential photograph to make, you know, this to me is how I cultivate curiosity. So I encourage you to think about how you can break free from notions of what you deem to be a good or a bad photograph, but to follow that inner child within you, embracing the spirit of play through the act of making a photograph. And so by detaching from the outcome, or, you know, the result of the image that you're making, whether or not it's good, bad, or whatever, and simply embracing the flow state of making pictures each day, yeah, you will find yourself infinitely inspired to make new images, I believe. And yeah, with that, I find joy, you know, with this like endless stream of going out there and photographing. I find that each day is new, you know, there's so many new experiences and things to photograph, right? And yeah, at the end of the day too, I mean, it's really in the process and the journey where you find meaning and you find the joy of this whole photography thing, you know, where essentially, you know, I've traveled all over the world and photographing for a decade straight, and, you know, I've made some strong photos, and, you know, I mastered street photography. But ultimately, by returning to day one and embracing this amateur mindset and photographing through the snapshot approach and sort of liberating myself through the medium and photographing in a very new and radical way, I'm just finding more joy in my life. And I encourage you to think about how you can use photography as a simple way in which you fuel your lust for life itself and find joy and meaning in the mundane. Because at the end of the day, the moment itself, you know, right here, right now, in the present, It's really all that matters. You know, we're all gonna die one day. And so maybe can't live forever, but at least you can make a photograph.